Hey everyone, welcome to JC Sharp with me, James. Today marks the penultimate video in the series of Deep Dive Solid Principles, and specifically today we're going to be looking at Interface Segregation Principle, or ISP. Before I go any further, just need to let you know an overview of the solid principles is linked in the description of this video, as well as the code for this and the repo that it comes from. You can also find that in the description too, if you want to code along. So let's crack on then. Interface Segregation Principle, or ISP. Essentially what ISP states is that each class or code object should only inherit and implement what it needs to. It shouldn't have to implement anything that it's not remotely interested in. Now the example that we're going to use today to go over this is a really straightforward, simple example that you'll find all across the internet, to be fair. And it's basically looking at two different types of employees, full-time and contractors, and the interface or interfaces that they use to inherit from. So let's crack on. Quick rundown of the code as always. So we've got a generic interface here for iEmployee, and that has a number of different properties, but specifically you'll see two for FTE annual salary and FTE benefits. And at the bottom here we have a full-time employee class which inherits from that interface and obviously implements all the properties as well as an implementation of the calculate salary method. Now let's say that the company that's using these classes, they're looking to add contractors to that. So let's go ahead and create ourselves a new contract class. Employee, and we'll have that inherit from iEmployee as well. So the first thing we'll do, and I'm going to use rider shortcuts from this, feel free to use your own IDE shortcuts or code it as necessary, is we're going to implement the existing iEmployee interface. Now for the calculate salary for a contractor, right, they're not interested in an annual salary, they don't have one, and they don't get any benefits. Contractors are primarily interested in an hourly rate and the number of hours that they've worked. So let's say the software company running these classes, they're not quite set on ISP yet. So they just go ahead and they extend this interface. So we'll add a new decimal in for contractor hourly rate. If I can find the curly braces, there we go. And we'll add in a public, let's go integer for contractor hours worked. Excellent. Okay, so straight off the bat, the first thing that we can see is because we've extended the properties in this interface, full-time employee also has to implement those properties. Now, if we're honest, a full-time employee isn't remotely interested about a contractor's hourly rate or hours worked, and they're never going to use those. But let's go ahead and implement those missing members anyway, so that we can demonstrate the purpose of what we're going to do today. Contractor as well also is interested in those, so we'll go ahead and implement them. And then what we can do here for the contractor's calculate salary is we can just return the contractor hourly rate multiplied by the contractor hours worked. Excellent. So in the real world then, this is never good, is it? We've got a full-time employee that has to implement contract hourly rate, contract hours worked, even though it's never going to be used by the full-time employee class. And we have a contractor employee that has to implement an annual salary and benefits, even though it's never going to use those anyway. So how do we fix this? Well, the easiest thing to do, because within C# and .NET, classes can inherit from multiple interfaces, we can just start splitting out the iEmployee interface into relevant little snippets. So let's do the full-time employee one first. So let's give ourselves a new public interface called iFullTime Employee. And within that, we'll simply cut these properties and pop them in there. So now we've got an iFullTime employee with a salary and some benefits, and the iEmployee one still has a name and email and the contractor stuff. So what we can do with a full-time employee class now is actually say, okay, well, realistically, we just want to inherit from full-time employee. Now you'll notice straight away it's saying to us, well, you don't actually need any of these properties at all, or this calculate salary method, but that's not strictly true. What we're missing now is the generic inheritance from the iEmployee interface, and we can fix that by saying that any full-time employee also inherits from iEmployee, like that. Job done. Now, we still have the problem that the full-time employee is still implementing contractor hourly rate, contractor hours worked. But on the flip side, the contractor now, because he's inheriting from iEmployee, doesn't actually need the FTE annual salary and FTE benefits because they've been moved out. They've been abstracted out into another interface. So let's go ahead and get rid of those. Excellent. So our contractor employee is looking good. He's still inheriting from a generic interface, and we'll fix that shortly. The next thing we want to do is get these contract hourly rates out. So let's go ahead and create ourselves yet another public interface called iContractor employee. And again, we'll have him inherit from iEmployee as well straight off the bat because we know that that's what's going to be happening anyway. And again, we'll shift those properties straight into there. So immediately then, iEmployee interface is literally down to 3 properties: a name, an email, and a way to calculate salary. And that's great. It's really generic, really straightforward. Every employee that we have is going to use those properties. Full-time employees are only going to need to inherit from iFulltime employee and iEmployee, and contractors will only need to inherit from iContractor employee and iEmployee as well. So the full-time employee now then, we can take out those unnecessary contractor properties and they're gone. And with the contractor now, we've got a few squiggly lines talking about, do you want to make these private? And that's because we're inheriting from the wrong interface. So if we make it inherit from iContractor employee, all of those properties now are set as expected. And the result of this is that your full-time employee doesn't have any of the contractor stuff in there that it's not interested in, not going to use. And likewise, the contractor class doesn't have any of the full-time employee information that it's not going to use. And that is essentially interface segregation, splitting things out so that classes don't need to implement or inherit anything that they're not interested in. And it's literally as simple as that. So hopefully, quick whirlwind tour, but you've enjoyed the video. If you have, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe. If there's anything you didn't like or you want to feedback on anything, please feel free to make points in the comments. I'm more than happy to enter into discussions with people, whether it's constructive or positive. Please let me know. With that, next week it will be dependency inversion and the final in the series, and then we've got some really interesting stuff planned for the future content. So until next time, thank you very much for watching. I'll see you then. Bye bye.